Welcome to the Full Moon Film Buff, episode 120. We're going to talk about Ginger Snaps from 2000. I rented this from Amazon Prime. I had seen this before, but only once decades ago. I got to watch it this time in the company of my 17-year-old daughter, who helped me notice several new tidbits I never would have spotted on my own. As always, we start with the prominent crew and cast. You can find links to a complete credit list in the show notes. The film was directed by John Fawcett. It was written by Karen Walton and John Fawcett. The effects makeup was by Paul Jones. John Fawcett is best known for co-creating the critically acclaimed series Orphan Black, running from 2013 to 2017. Following the success of Ginger Snaps, he continued working extensively in television, creating episodes of notable series including Xena Warrior Princess, Queer as Folk, and Lost Girl. He is developing a television series based on Ginger Snaps with UK producers Sid Gentle Films. Similar to Fawcett, Karen Walton is best known for writing the screenplay for the cult horror film Ginger Snaps and being one of the key writers on the sci-fi series Orphan Black. Paul Jones began his career in the late 80s in England on such films as Nightbreed and Hellraiser 3: Hell on Earth. Jones was responsible for redesigning and applying the iconic pinhead makeup for the latter. Jones relocated to Toronto and started his own effects company. For 30 years, Paul Jones Effects Studio provided effects for genre films. Jones was makeup effects designer on several series, including Orphan Black, and created prosthetics effects for the season 1 of Amazon's The Boys. Recently returning to freelance, Paul is currently prosthetics and animatronics designer on What We Do in the Shadows. The cast includes Emily Perkins as Bridget, Catherine Isabel as Ginger, Chris Lemche as Sam, Mimi Rogers as Pamela Fitzgerald, Jesse Moss as Jason, Danielle Hampton as Trina, John Bourgeois as Henry Fitzgerald, Peter Kelligan as Mr. Wayne, Pak Kwang Ho as the janitor, and Nick Nolan as the creature/Ginger Wolf. Emily Perkins started acting as a child in the 80s, with her breakout role coming in 1990 when she played young Beverly Marsh in Stephen King's It. While she appeared in several TV shows and movies throughout her career, she is best known for playing Bridget in the Ginger Snaps series. Her character became the main focus of the 2004 sequel, Ginger Snaps 2 Unleashed. Fans might also recognize her from guest spots on popular shows like Supernatural and The X-Files. Catherine Isabel has made her mark in many types of films, but she's especially famous for her work in horror movies. Coming from a showbiz family, her father is art director Graham Murray, she started acting in the late 80s while still a child. Beyond her role as Ginger, which she played in all 3 Ginger Snaps films, she became a true horror star through movies like American Mary and Freddy vs. Jason. TV fans might recognize her from shows like Supernatural, The X-Files, The Order, and the American version of Being Human. Chris Lemche started acting in the late 90s, appearing in films like Teen Night and David Cronenberg's Existence. After these early roles, he built a steady career in both TV and movies, including a recurring part in Joan of Arcadia and roles in horror films like My Little Eye and Final Destination 3. Mimi Rogers has been acting steadily since the early 80s, starting with TV shows like Hill Street Blues and Magnum P.I. She landed her big break in Ridley Scott's Someone to Watch Over Me. During the 90s, she appeared in movies like Lost in Space, Austin Powers, and Ginger Snaps, while also taking roles in TV shows like The X-Files and Mad Men. She's a competitive poker player and has participated in major tournaments. These days, you can see her as Honey Chandler in Bosch and its spin-off series. Jesse Moss started as a child actor in the early 90s and has worked steadily in both TV and movies ever since. While horror fans know him from Ginger Snaps and Final Destination 3, he showed his comedy skills in the absolutely brilliant Tucker and Dale vs. Evil. He's also appeared in TV shows like Supernatural and Continuum, and has done voice work for various projects. Danielle Hampton got her start as a dancer before switching to acting. Her highest profile role seems to be Paradise Falls on Canadian television. John Bourgeois has a lengthy career. He appeared in X-Men Apocalypse and numerous other films and TV shows. Peter Kelligan made his mark in Canadian comedy TV, particularly as Jim Walcott in The Newsroom and Ranger Gord in The Red Green Show. He's also known for playing Richard Strong in The Industry, a show that poked fun at Canadian television, and for his role in 18 to Life. Pak Kwang Ho has over 300 film credits, almost all of them are for Chinese-language Hong Kong cinema. Nick Nolan is primarily a stuntman, and I couldn't find a lot of details about him. I cannot recommend this film highly enough for fans of both werewolf movies and intelligent horror in general. This film is top 10 list worthy. This is a masterclass in using supernatural horror as a metaphor and combining practical effects with genuine emotional depth. While some special effects do show their age, the core themes and performances remain powerful. Fair warning, this is not a traditional werewolf tale. It is considerably darker and more psychological than many genre entries. While it may have imperfections, they do little to diminish its overall excellence. As a tidbit, the film initially struggled to find funding because many producers thought it too controversial to combine teenage female sexuality with horror elements. On top of that, the violence in a high school setting in the wake of the Columbine shootings made people nervous. The project was rejected multiple times before finally being made. Several casting directors didn't even want to have to deal with it. I expect that the film's subject matter, frank discussion of teenage sexuality and self-harm, means that YouTube will probably not push this video out. I don't normally ask this, but this is a special case. If you know someone who would be interested in this film and this episode, please share the video. It's worth noting that this was filmed in Canada, part of a wave of innovative Canadian horror films in the late 90s and early 2000s. The film had a modest budget of $5 million, but has since become a cult classic, spawning a sequel and a prequel. So, let's move on to the synopsis. In Bailey Downs, something is killing dogs. Bridget and Ginger Fitzgerald are morbid teenage sisters fascinated with death. They fantasize about killing themselves. As children, they made a pact to get out of the suburbs or die together before they turned 16. They stage violent and gory death scene photo shoots for class art projects. Ginger is 15 now and has just started attracting unwanted attention from boys. While on the way to kidnap the dog belonging to school bully Trina Sinclair, and on the night of the full moon, Gina's first period starts. The scent of blood attracts the beast of Bailey Downs, the creature responsible for the dog's deaths. The beast violently attacks Ginger. Bridget tries to defend her sister. As the girls flee, Sam Miller, the local drug dealer, runs over the creature in his van. Following this attack, Ginger begins undergoing transformations that make Bridget extremely nervous. Her wounds heal quickly and she becomes aggressive. She starts experimenting with drugs. Sam tells Bridget that he hit a lycanthrope. Trina's pit bull goes feral around Ginger, who punches the dog out. Hair grows from Ginger's scars and she menstruates heavily. As the film goes on, her teeth grow longer, her hair turns increasingly white, and her nails become claws. This drives a wedge between the concerned Bridget and the moody Ginger. Sam and Bridget suspect that Ginger is becoming a werewolf. Since the van killed the first werewolf, they figure Hollywood rules about silver and full moons might not necessarily apply. Ginger begins growing a tail. She begins dating her classmate Jason McCarty. One night, Ginger bites Jason's neck and has unprotected sex with him, despite his insistence that they use protection. She kills the family dog Norman. Later, she vomits blood. Bridget gives Ginger a silver belly piercing as a test. Ginger snaps at school and furiously beats Trina. Jason starts showing similar symptoms to Ginger. Bridget seeks out Sam, who suggests infusing an extract of monkshood, related to the wolfsbane plant, a perennial often referred to in lycanthropic folklore, to perhaps create a cure. Trina accuses Ginger of kidnapping her dog. Ginger attacks Trina, and Trina suffers a fatal accident when she tries defending herself. The sisters hide the body in a freezer. Bridget accidentally breaks off two of Trina's figures while moving the body, and the figures get misplaced when they bury her in a shallow grave. Bridget is confronted by Jason, who is desperate to know what's happening to him. At home, Ginger tries to cut off her tail, and Bridget sleeps with a bat since Ginger scares her. On Halloween, Bridget brings monkshood to Sam, and he creates a potential cure. On the way to find Ginger, she runs into Jason, who attacks her. She defends herself by using the syringe on him and witnesses his immediate behavior change, establishing that the cure works, at least some partially. At school, Bridget discovers Ginger has murdered school counselor Mr. Wayne. Ginger kills the janitor, trying to keep Mr. Wayne's death secret, and just because she likes killing. Bridget witnesses the murder. Ginger likens killing to masturbating and offers to make Bridget a werewolf too. Bridget, I know she's your sister, but there is just too much to cover up now. Ginger announces her intent to kill Sam next at the Greenhouse Bash, a Halloween party that he hosts. The girl's mom discovers Trina's fingers and corpse. She finds Bridget and drives her to the Greenhouse Bash. She tells Bridget that she will protect the girls from the consequences of their crime. At the party, Ginger is almost fully transformed. Sam rejects her sexual advances, but she won't take no for an answer. Bridget arrives to find Ginger hurting Sam. Bridget cuts both their palms and clasps their hands together, infecting herself with Ginger's blood. She convinces Ginger of her loyalty and willingness to help. As Ginger feels her final transformation approaching, Sam knocks her unconscious with a shovel. They put Ginger in the van to take her home to prepare more cure for her. During the drive, Ginger fully transforms into a werewolf and escapes the van. Sam and Bridget hide in the pantry as Sam prepares the new cure. Ginger attacks Sam the second he opens the door to find her. Bridget recovers the syringe. Finding Sam breathing shallowly and barely holding on, Bridget tries to save him by drinking his blood to calm Ginger down, but she can't go through with it. Ginger rips Sam's throat out. Ginger chases Bridget, who hides in the room where they grew up. Bridget holds the syringe in front of her in one hand and a knife in the other. Ginger lunges at Bridget and is impaled on the knife, fatally wounding herself. Bridget lays her head on her sister's chest and weeps as Ginger exhales her final breath. The werewolf transformation effects by Paul Jones deserve special attention. While many films in the genre rush through their full transformation, Ginger Snaps opts for a more nuanced progression. Following her attack, Ginger's metamorphosis unfolds gradually, beginning with subtle alterations like the emergence of a tail, spinal deformity, scar tissue sprouting hair, and barely perceptible facial changes. This measured approach brilliantly reinforces the film's puberty metaphor. Each transformation is incremental, easily overlooked in isolation, yet collectively they fundamentally alter Ginger's being, mirroring both the transition from adolescence to womanhood and from human to monster. The climactic transformation sequence in the van represents Ginger's point of no return. Already appearing largely inhuman, her final metamorphosis from bipedal wolf hybrid to quadrupedal beast is executed with haunting effectiveness. The practical effects work here is exceptional, conveying the change's physical agony and grotesque nature. The only shortcoming lies in the final white werewolf design, which doesn't quite match the high bar set by earlier stages of the transformation. The film compensates by keeping the fully transformed Ginger Wolf largely in shadow or off-screen, but this remains a minor flaw in an otherwise masterful achievement. Now, Ginger Wolf deliberately exploits established werewolf conventions to serve its deeper metaphorical narrative. While the lunar cycle maintains its traditional importance, the film cleverly directly links it to menstruation, developing the obvious parallel. The night Ginger is attacked is both her first period and the full moon. The moon becomes a ticking clock, marking Ginger's inexorable transformation into both woman and monster. The film's rejection of silver as a cure or as weapon is noteworthy, particularly in comparison to The Curse from the previous year. Rather than falling back on this genre staple, Ginger Snaps introduces monkshood, wolfsbane, as a potential treatment. This choice is fascinating because traditionally wolfsbane is considered toxic to werewolves rather than medicinal. By repositioning it as a possible cure, the film suggests that sometimes the very thing that could save you might also destroy you, much like how the experiences of adolescence can ultimately strengthen us. The transmission of lycanthropy through bites remains, but the film recontextualizes this trope by explicitly treating it as a sexually transmitted infection. This interpretation reinforces the puberty metaphor, addressing teenage sexuality and its consequences. The infection represents not just a sexual awakening, but also the social and emotional complications that come with it. Each new victim creates a chain of transmission mirroring real-world anxieties about sexual activity and its ripple effects through social groups. Perhaps most significantly, Ginger Snaps breaks from the traditional cyclical nature of werewolf transformations. Instead of a monthly reversal, the change is a gradual and irreversible progression. This permanence serves as a metaphor for maturation. You can't go back to being a child once you've grown up. Certain choices and experiences fundamentally alter who we are, and no amount of wishing can reverse that process. Just as Ginger cannot return to her pre-bite existence, teenagers can't reclaim their pre-adolescent innocence. This one-way transformation also speaks to the film's darker themes about loss of identity and the irreversible nature of violence. Once Ginger begins embracing her violent impulses, each transgression makes it harder to maintain her humanity. What starts out as verbal aggression and risky experimentation escalates into assault, manslaughter, and eventually murder. The perpetual transformation becomes a stark reminder that some actions permanently mark our psyche and relationships. It's a sobering message about responsibility and consequences, far removed from the typical werewolf narrative of temporary monthly transformations that allow for a return to normalcy. So let's move on to themes. First, let's dig into the coming of age theme. Horror has long served as a vehicle for exploring human anxieties about physical transformation, but few films have wielded this tool as effectively as Ginger Snaps. The film uses lycanthropy as a metaphor for female puberty, creating a narrative that resonates deeply with the genuine horrors of adolescent transformation. The film's genius lies in how it parallels the natural processes of puberty with supernatural metamorphosis. Hair grows in unexpected places, body proportions shift uncomfortably, and blood makes an appearance, all hallmarks of both werewolf transformation and female adolescence. But rather than treating these changes with the clinical distance of a health class video or the sanitized approach of a typical teen drama, Ginger Snaps acknowledges the visceral horror of feeling your body mutate beyond your control. When Bridget declares something's wrong, like more than you being female, she voices an almost universal teenage experience, the profound alienation from one's changing body and self. The psychological aspects of puberty receive equal treatment. Ginger's increasing aggression and sexual awakening mirror the hormonal turbulence of adolescence. Her mood swings are more than just typical teenage behavior. They're genuinely frightening episodes where she becomes almost unrecognizable to herself and others, notably her younger sister. The film validates what many teenage girls experience but rarely see acknowledged. These changes can feel monstrous. They can make you feel like you're losing your grip on who you are. Moreover, the film explores how society responds to female sexuality and maturation. Ginger's transformation brings male attention that she's never had before, but it also brings judgment and fear from her own community. The way others react to her changes, with a mix of attraction, revulsion, and moral panic, captures the contradictory message society sends to young women about their developing sexuality. She's simultaneously expected to be desirable and demonized for being desired. She literally can't win. Ginger Snaps succeeds because it treats its metaphor with absolute seriousness. The horror is not played for laughs or diminished with levity. It's presented as the genuinely traumatic experience it can be. When Ginger's body betrays her, when her desires become overwhelming, and when she feels herself becoming a monster, the film doesn't flinch. It validates these feelings, suggesting that perhaps the real horror of adolescence isn't that these experiences are abnormal, but that they're entirely natural. In doing so, the film offers catharsis to anyone who has experienced their own body as a site of horror during puberty. It says that it's okay to be terrified of these changes, to feel monstrous, to rage against the transformation that's being forced upon you. By literalizing those internal experiences through the werewolf metaphor, Ginger Snaps creates a space where the genuine trauma of female adolescence can be acknowledged and processed. The result is a horror film that transcends its genre trappings to become something rarer, a truthful portrayal of the confusion, fear, and painful transformation inherent in growing up female. Now I want to dive deeper into the sisters' relationship. Beneath the supernatural horror and bloody transformations, Ginger Snaps is a portrait of sisterly devotion pushed to its breaking point. Ginger and Bridget Fitzgerald begin the film as more than sisters. They're conspirators against the world, bound by their shared outsider status and macabre sensibilities. Their pledge, out by 16 or dead in the scene, is more than teenage melodrama. It's a declaration of absolute loyalty to each other and their rejection of conventional society. The sisters have created a fortress of two against the conformist pressures of suburbia. Even their delayed puberty seems to be an act of collective will, a refusal to grow up and grow apart. But Ginger's period cracks this careful unity, and the werewolf's bite shatters it. As Ginger begins both transformations, the film explores if loyalty can survive when one person changes while the other stays the same. Bridget watches her sister become something else entirely. The shared death obsession that once bound them takes on a terrifying new reality as Ginger's murderous impulses emerge. Their lives fall out of sync, leaving Bridget struggling to understand her rapidly evolving sister. The sisters' relationship is further complicated by their shifting power dynamic. Previously inseparable equals, the changes expose more traditional older-younger sister roles, but with a dark twist. Ginger's transformation makes her simultaneously more powerful and more vulnerable, while Bridget must grow from follower to potential savior. Their covenant rings, once symbols of the unified resistance against the world, become reminders of a promise that may be impossible to keep. The film asks difficult questions about the nature of loyalty itself. When Ginger begins to embrace her violent new nature, Bridget faces an impossible choice: support her sister unconditionally, or try to save her from what she's becoming. Is true loyalty standing by someone no matter what, or is it having the courage to stop them from destroying themselves? Through Bridget's desperate search for a cure, the film suggests that sometimes the most loyal act is opposition, fighting for someone's soul even when they've given up the fight themselves. This exploration becomes particularly poignant through the lens of enabling behavior. Bridget initially helps cover up Ginger's violent acts, burying evidence and making excuses. It's a painfully realistic portrayal of how loyalty can become complicity, how love can blind us to the damage we're helping cause. The film forces Bridget and the audience to consider the point where protective instincts become destructive. The turning point felt, to me, like Ginger killing Mr. Wayne and the janitor. Trina's death was an accident. Mr. Wayne and the janitor were intentional, even if not planned. The film's tragic power comes from its understanding that some bonds can't survive transformation intact. As Ginger slips further and further into lycanthropy, Bridget faces the reality that loyalty sometimes means letting go. The sister who once staged artistic death photos is now causing real death, and love requires confronting rather than enabling this change. Their original suicide pact transforms into something more complex, a question of whether death might be preferable to complete metamorphosis, and whether killing can be an act of love. Ginger Snaps ultimately suggests that true sisterly loyalty isn't about maintaining the status quo or enabling destructive behavior. Instead, it's about fighting for each other, even when that fight seems hopeless. When Bridget finally confronts Ginger in the film's bloody climax, it's not a betrayal of their bond, but is its ultimate expression, a desperate attempt to save what remains of her sister, even if that salvation can only come through violence. Their story becomes a dark reflection on how the deepest loyalties are tested not by external threats, but by the internal changes that transform the people we love into strangers. Finally, let's take a look at how Ginger Snaps weaves together themes of desire and self-control without falling into common horror movie traps. The film presents sexuality as a complex landscape where power and vulnerability are deeply intertwined. We see this most clearly in Ginger's transformation, which brings her a new sexual confidence and magnetism. She suddenly finds herself able to command attention from male classmates who previously ignored her, and this newfound power proves intoxicating. Yet the film carefully shows us that this power comes with serious consequences, as each sexual encounter pushes her closer to losing control. The film cleverly turns traditional gender roles upside down, with Ginger taking on the role of aggressor rather than playing the typical passive female character. However, this role reversal isn't presented as simple female empowerment. Instead, we watch as Ginger's sexual encounters grow increasingly violent, until the line between desire and predatory hunger become frighteningly blurred. This progression raises uncomfortable questions about power dynamics in sexual relationships, suggesting that domination is corrupting, regardless of who holds the upper hand. What makes this exploration so powerful is how it mirrors real teenage experiences. Anyone who remembers the awkwardness of adolescent sexuality will recognize Ginger's fumbling attempts to understand her desires and manage her new sexual power. Through the reactions of those around Ginger, her parents, teachers, and peers, we see society's contradictory messages about female sexuality laid bare. Young women are expected to be sexually attractive, while simultaneously being condemned for expressing sexual desire. We see this double standard play out through Ginger, as well as through another character, Trina, who faces criticism for her sexual desires from the very boys who are pursuing her. Yet the film doesn't simply advocate for unrestricted sexual expression. Instead, it suggests that true sexual empowerment comes from maintaining control over one's desires. Ginger's struggle to master her transforming body and appetites becomes a powerful metaphor for the importance of self-awareness and personal boundaries. The film's treatment of sexuality and violence serves as a striking analogy for uncontrolled desire. As Ginger's sexual encounters become more violent and her violent acts become more passionate, we see how desire without empathy leads to destruction. This isn't a simplistic warning about the dangers of sex. Rather, it's a thoughtful exploration of how sexual power, like any form of power, requires ethical consideration and self-restraint. What's particularly refreshing about Ginger Snaps is how it presents female sexuality as belonging to women themselves, not merely existing for male pleasure. Though Ginger's sexual journey ultimately leads to her destruction, it remains entirely her own. Her choices, whether wise or disastrous, spring from her own desires rather than from any attempt to please others. This ownership of sexuality offers a welcome change from horror films that reduce female sexuality to either victimhood or temptation. The film ultimately suggests that sexual empowerment lies neither in complete repression nor in unlimited expression, but in consciously navigating one's desires while maintaining one's humanity. Through its werewolf metaphor, Ginger Snaps creates a powerful space to explore how sexuality can be both empowering and dangerous, both natural and potentially destructive. It leaves us with a lasting message that sexual power requires balance, not to satisfy social conventions, but to preserve our essential humanity in the face of overwhelming desire. So, if you like lycanthropes, like, share, and subscribe. Contribute your thoughts and additional observations in the comments below. Let me know what I missed or if you noticed anything else. Next, I plan on discussing Monster Mash from 2000. Keep your eye on the moon, a silver bullet in the chamber, and we'll see you back next episode.